what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Let me just strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I appreciate the remarks of the gentleman from New York, and I do agree with him that it would be best, certainly, if the debate could center around the substance of the bill, the legislation. That's why we're here tonight. The fact that we will have 12 appropriation bills coming up, and we can't focus on much of the substance of that legislation because it won't be included in that legislation. We'll have to wait. We'll have to write to the committee and ask for a request or ask for a response back. You know, a lot of us receive letters from Boy Scouts who are writing for their Citizenship in the Nation merit badge. I'm wondering if we'll qualify for the same thing by writing to the committee. I think we're entitled a little more than that. As members of Congress, I think we're entitled to actually debate this on the floor. The other gentleman from New York who talked a bit earlier said that we're standing with the American people. I would suggest you may want to go in and log on and see how this is being debated in the blogosphere or in the newspapers tomorrow. Let me just read a bit of one editorial in tomorrow's Roll Call, for example, and see how they're playing it. Roll Call is not exactly a bastion of the right. It mentions here, it says, so on Monday, he, meaning the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, announced a new policy. Earmarks will be fully disclosed prior to the August recess, after House voting, but before House-Senate conference, and may be challenged by writing a letter to the Appropriations Committee. After considering defenses from their sponsors, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee will decide whether to put earmarks into conference reports. There will still be no votes on the issue. The chairman of the Appropriations Committee reiterated this system was necessitated by time constraints that made it impossible to vet 32,000 earmark requests before upcoming votes on appropriation bills. Asked if he would revert to a policy of full and early disclosure next year, he said that he wanted to, but couldn't rule out the possibility that specific circumstances would arise. This is what they say. This simply isn't good enough. The chairman of the Appropriations Committee should not only be disclosing all earmarks before House voting, but all earmark requests. Earmarks should be open to public vetting, full debate, and floor challenge. I have the utmost respect for the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. He calls himself a reformer, and I believe that. I've had the opportunity to debate him over the past several years on these earmarks, and I know that he is troubled by them, as well he should be. And I know that he struggles with a way to deal with them. I simply believe, and I think people across the country feel that we're better served with real transparency. And real transparency is not keeping these earmarks secret until a point at which you have no ability to challenge them on the floor, when you can simply write a letter and ask for a response. When we are legislators, we're not potted plants here. We're here for a purpose. We're here to legislate. And to be relegated to just writing a letter and asking for a response is simply not sufficient. So I simply would say, if you think, Mr. Chairman, if the majority party thinks that they are with the people across the country, that I would beg to differ, and I would ask them to reconsider that and wonder if people across the country really want a process where earmarks are kept secret until people in this body, whose job it is to legislate, don't have an opportunity to legislate. I would.
I thank the gentleman, and I know he's serious on this issue, and I respect his integrity on the issue. I also respect his sense of consistency. But let me ask the gentleman one question. Our job is to try to develop a process that is not a pro forma process of review, but one that is actually effective. Could I ask the gentleman how he's offered a lot of motions in the past 2 years to strike earmarks? Could I ask him how many of them have been successful?
Not one. I came to the floor 39 times and was beaten like a rented mule every time.
And if the gentleman would yield further, but that is not the gentleman's fault. He has genuinely tried to ferret out what he thought to be troublesome earmarks, and occasionally some of mine. Could I ask that the gentleman have 2 additional minutes?
The gentleman has unanimous consent that the gentleman from Arizona have 2 additional minutes. Is there objection? The chair hears none.
I thank the gentleman for his courtesy. One thing that I didn't have, the ability when I came before, I never had the ability to know whose earmark I was challenging. Many times, many of those 39 times I came to the floor, debated, even asked for a vote, and still had no clue. After the vote was called and it was lost, whose earmark that was. That wouldn't happen today because, and I commend the Democrats for doing this, because of the rules put in place for disclosure. That is great. That is good transparency. But with that transparency, we have to have accountability.
And would the gentleman yield on that point?
I would.
I agree we need accountability. And I want to simply say I don't regard your failure to pass any of your amendments as a personal failure on your part. Mr. Speaker, I think the gentleman has done his dead level best. The problem is that the system is not conducive to producing real results. Because as the gentleman himself has said on this House floor, members look at these motions and they say, oh, I'm not going to vote for the Flake Amendment because I've got earmarks hanging out here and I don't want to have mine endangered. The result has been that nothing has happened. That's why we've had some of the problems we've had. We can have an honest disagreement about what will be the best system, but I would hope that the gentleman would recognize even though he might disagree with it, it is an honest effort to develop a system which is far more forthcoming than the one we've had in the past. And I would simply point out that while the majority leader indicated that he had adopted transparency proposals last year, they conveniently arranged them so that they didn't apply to any of the appropriation bills that you passed last year. That's not the gentleman's fault, but it is the responsibility of the minority leader, and I thank the gentleman for the time.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I move that the committee do